writers all. I'm going to read a couple of poems from that poet. And so writing poetry has changed my life permanently. I was in Phoenix Strong's writing classes before, right? And he critiqued our works, and that encouraged me to continue writing with this very helpful advice. And he also conducts writing classes too, right? And one of the things that writing has afforded me to do is to travel to different places and to let the National Arts Council pay for my trips. And I just came back from a writing residency, actually in the States. Over that one. I was in Fort Worden and Fort Townsend, Washington. For those of you who are older, you probably remember An Officer and a Gentleman, starring Richard Gere, and it was shot there. It's a very beautiful place, right next to Puget Sound. You get to see the seagulls. Unfortunately, it's a place for writing retreats, right? So we were given individual cabins. There were about 20 artists in different fields, and I didn't get to meet any other writers. I got to talk to a painter and her sister, and we ate camembert, sipped red wine, listened to jazz music, and then one of them read from Beckett, right? And that was all happening that we had there. The most romantic thing that happened in Fort Worth was seeing deer have lunch in my backyard. But for most of the time, we were all alone. It was a tragic part here. And part of being a writer means that, being ready to be all alone, right? In the act of writing. Although many writers can be very gregarious, have plenty of friends, but when you're writing about love or tragedy, you have to do it all by yourself. Okay, and let's move on. Okay, this is a famous quotation from Dead Poets Society, and Robin Williams' character said that poetry, beauty, romance, and love, these are what we stay alive for, right? And many of the greatest poems have been about love, right? And most people buy poetry books because of the love poetry there. So that's why, it's partly why I write about love as well. Okay, here is one of the earliest Western poems about love, and I got this suggestion for me to show this to you from my mentor in the NTU Creative Writing Program. I wouldn't have thought of Sappho, but so she's one of the 9 immortal lyric poets of Greece, the only woman among them. And this is an ode to love, really, because, okay, so the Greeks are very religious people, but she is writing a hymn to Aphrodite. She's actually writing about love. And what do we find there? Maybe we can have some audience participation. Nigel, you've probably read this before. Maybe you can read part of it, maybe the last part. This is an abridged version, right? We can read maybe the last part, beginning with a chariot joke. Nigel is from Catholic JC. He's also he's a teacher writer. Yeah.
I'm a teacher, aspiring writer, so it would be more accurate to say. With thy chariot wheeled, and with doves that drew thee, fair and fleet around the dark earth from heaven, dipping vibrant wings down the azure distance through the mid-ether. She that fain would fly, she shall quickly follow. She that now rejects, yet with gifts shall woo thee. She that heeds thee not, soon shall love to madness. love thee, the loathed one.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's the immortal love poem. What is it trying to say? What is your take on that? What is the poet saying about love?
It seems like a
Imagine.
It seems like a spell.
Spell.
Actually,
She's casting a spell.
to change her fortunes and
Okay, so that the loved one would notice her. Right? It's just okay. Okay, there are only a few very young people here. You probably know that Wet 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 song. It's exactly the same sentiment. Right? Love is all around me, and the poet is making a supplication to love, right? To make the loved one react or respond. And it's something universal, and people have been writing about that. Right? And this is one of the earliest and best examples of that kind of love poem. Okay, so from the Greeks, you move on to the medieval writers, and Dante is one of those best writers. Genevieve, maybe you could read that. She's also a teacher writer, and she's an award-winning teacher writer. Tell us. Maybe the last part. And I saw Genevieve. That's in the middle section. And I saw.
And I saw that in all her ways she was most praiseworthy and noble. That indeed the words of the poet Homer might have been said of her. She did not seem the daughter of a mortal man but of a god. Through her image, which was always present in my mind, incited love to dominate me. Its influence was so noble that it never allowed love to guide me without the faithful counsel of reason, and everything in which such counsel was good to hear.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. And how is the emotion in this poem different from that in Sappho's poem, ladies and gents? Are they different or are they the same? Yeah, what do you think?
This one is also it's just like
Yes.
This
I find it dominating.
it's like possessive.
Possessive. Okay, but you also have that, don't you have that in the first poem as well? Let me just go back to the previous slide. Because the poet is invoking love to cast a spell on the loved one. This is a very modern poem, actually. I won't explain because there are kids here. Don't you have the same dominating desire or passion? But let's go back to Dante. How is that different from Sappho's? We have a little student in the back. How is this Vita Nova different from? How is the Vita Nova, the sentiment here, different from that in Sappho's poem? Is it very passionate?
Yeah, but this one seems more hopeless.
More helpless?
Yeah.
In what sense? How does Dante show that helpless?
Whereas Sappho could implore Aphrodite to help
Yes.
her, this one's helpless. He can't do anything about it, but think about it.
Okay, good. You mentioned thinking, right? And he's a truly medieval man. So for him, order is very important, right reason, even in love. And in that sense, he's different from Sappho, right? For him, it's ordered, it's very virtuous, or at least in this poem, or in this section of the Vita Nova. Right? Virtue is very important, right reason. Unlike in the works of the Greeks. Okay, and I have a few other poems, but we won't I won't ask you because you must be very familiar with these. And this one is actually a present to a loved one, the present of immortality. And it's a typical sonnet with the rhymes. And this one is one by one of my favorite poets, Pablo Neruda, and it's about losing one's lover. Right. It's also what you would hear from in Adele's songs by Adele, the singer. Yeah, so I've been alluding to songs and poems. Right? Songs are also poems. In fact, poems started out as one song. Right? So they're not really poor cousins to poems. And okay, I'll show it to you. So this is how the Greeks and the Romans defined love. Right? For them, love is an excess of emotion or feeling, something that has to be controlled, and it's a disease. And for them, the best way to cure love would be to write about it. Right? And so writing love poetry became a sort of therapy for people. And definitely, for the kids, do you recognize the people in the picture? And these are from my school, so they probably won't. Because they're all studying all the time. Do you recognize the people in the picture? Zach and Widron? No? Not from any, okay, or maybe the older people? Or is it too small? Do you recognize who those people are? Ed? Okay. The lit major. You're not fans of pop culture. Feelings.
How many see the faces?
Small. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I can't make it any bigger without covering. That's Taylor Swift. Right, and she, yes. Yeah, well, it's slightly cold. And Taylor Swift has become a multi-billionaire writing about love and her tragic experiences of love, right? Beside her is one of those guys in One Direction. And she has written about him, and it has become a hit. And maybe that's her way of also getting over heartbreak. Right? And some of you may want to consider writing love poetry, right? As a way to deal with very difficult issues. Let's go back a little bit. And tragedy. Okay, can be in the form of love, can be about love, right? And love can lead to tragedy. The classic way of looking at tragedy is it's being on a serious theme. Usually involving a great person. Think of Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king, right? A great person who is destined to fall because of a tragic flaw. Maybe he's too proud, or some sin or irregularity in his family's history. Right, his father wanted to get rid of him as a child, right? And so that leads to a seeming catastrophe. But even in Sophocles, there's a suggestion of a reconciliation or a return to order. Right, once the tragic character falls and accepts his fate. If he doesn't accept it, he becomes very tragic. Okay, no, but Sophocles is not the only Greek tragedy writer, and we'll cursorily go through two others. Okay, and so poetry is an emotional response to an image, an event, an experience, or memory. And on the screen we have one of the best definitions of poetry, in my opinion, by a great American poet. And he talks about poem as being it's beginning with a lump in the throat. Something mysterious that we can't fully explain, but it's a thing of beauty, that we can read over and over again, and that we can repeat in our head. Okay, I already mentioned that for the Greeks, an emotion can be negative if it's too excessive. So for them, they wanted to achieve this golden mean, right? They didn't want excesses. And love was excessive for them. And two schools of thought prevail in relation to love. For the Stoics, love is a strive or an impulse, something to be stamped out. And for the Epicureans, it should be fostered if it leads to pleasure. Okay, now I'm going to read from Love Gathers All from one of the editors. Right? Aaron Lee, and this is also about being there for the other. Right? This is stargazing in Cappadocia, and an abridged version appears on screen. The last time we were together, we marveled at the far-off points of light speckling the sky. I held you close and told you how they spend their days and nights in a slow burn, radiating an endless hunger from their secret places in heaven. Now, in your absence, each constellation frames your face in a forest of stars, in every dream I've ever dreamt. Each dream is life's vivid counterpart, and each night, love's design imprints itself on me and you, indelible, defining distance. Beautiful. And what makes it work? What are some of the techniques used by the poet that wage love? Just a review of things that you already know. What could be some of the techniques used by the poet to express his love for his lover who is away? She was probably studying in the States there. In which, what are some of the techniques used by Aaron Lee in this poem? There are several. Can you mention one? How does he express his love here? Told you how they spend their days and nights in a slow burn. What do those lines refer to? Yeah. And told you how they spend their days and nights in a slow burn in the first stanza.
What does he refer to?
Oh, what do those lines refer to? What is describing that?
The time they spend together?
Time spent together. But that's, he's talking about them in the plural, right? So what else is plural in that part, in that first stanza?
Probably using the stars.
The stars, right?
Symbolize something else. Not just the stars.
It's stars, times together. And do you remember that device that you use when you attribute human qualities to inanimate objects? It's this personification. And you find that here. Any other techniques that you can see there?
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole, very good. Yeah, so have you ever seen stars that are like that? That is spending their days and nights in a slow burn? Maybe it's kind of hard to tell in Singapore because you don't always see the stars clearly, right? Because of the bright lights in the city. But yeah, there is hyperbole there, right? Love's design imprinting itself on the port, indelible, defying distance. Okay? And there's plenty of action as well. He's not just telling us things, but he's narrating how those stars are moving and how his love is actually reaching out to his loved one in the U.S. Here is a poem poem from A World in Transit, and it's rather unusual. Right? So I'm taking the voice of a Chinese astronaut. And you have an abridged version there as well. A tiger's view of Earth. Earth-like rising with shadow patches. Bird's nest stadium lights multiply, dazzling as I cling to handlebars, my feet and dreams dangling in space. With eyes shut, I see my little girl jumping into bed, calling Papa. My wife beside her pointing at me, twinkling in the night sky. Dark, quiet waters wash the earth, flushing out silt from sandy shores. A flag I wave does not flutter in space. Like my cheek planted on my lover's navel, moving softly with each breath. Both of us lie awake till dawn, chasing away doubts unresolved before my rocket shoots through the firmament. The world is aglow with rocks, hemming in suit-dressed miners, forests laden with goods for sweatshops, treasures from the deep hauled by divers. I raise a cup to my young family, the conscious, the concerns invisible in the gem of earth. My heart beats roaring like a fire truck until my landing gear. Okay, so you've read a few love poems that span all the way from Time of the Beach to 2 years ago. And now it's your turn to write the great Southeast Asian love song, right? And the different types of poems is short enough for you to do in 15 minutes. I hope you brought paper and pen with you. Why don't you try your hand at this? And I've actually isolated some of the techniques of the editors of the Love Gathers Ball, right? And you have them there on screen. And you can follow that template to create your own songs. And why don't you do that, ladies and gentlemen, right now? You've got 15 minutes. And we can have volunteers to read, if you want a poem. Okay? 15 minutes, time begins now. See you for a while. You can use the microphone. What is your name? Hello? Is it? Like there's one? So this is Sonia, and here is her love song.
Okay, I'm just going to start. The susurration of the shallow waves, awash on sandy shores of broken dreams, like the quiet drone of our telly after the last program in the night time, at the end of the day of cacophonous words firing and misfiring at the target board, hitting hard but missing the mark. An abundance of lyric and feeling made flesh, but dry as bone and cold to touch. Dead weight, hanging in the air around our necks, grown heavy and tight, till no breath passed between these lips and the quiet between these sheets of our bed afloat in emotional silence.
Can we give her a big hand? Isn't that wonderful? And she did it in 15 minutes. So she'll probably write more of love poems. And you'll surely write one more poem before the night is over. And let's move on to a tragedy. Okay, yeah, so this is a tragic poem because love doesn't always turn out well, right? And there's a whole tradition of heartbreak poetry and songs out there. And this is by Robert Gill, one of the pioneers of Singapore poetry. And you also find this in Love Gathers All. I think there are copies together with all other trances. This is separations. Whatever it is that makes us unbearable to one another, pushes to separations, unlooked for, but welcome. Work-induced partitions by day, children-forced proximities by night, tugs the daily threads of loving as we sow in our old singer. And as we snip, we hear them snap, as well as sounds, the barbed static, your voice, our sighs, my face so jowled it weighs me down. I straighten the next day though, but you grate a foghorn for days. I blame your father for your distemper. Your mother spoiled you yell, and slam bang into your bedroom. I stay in mine quietly. Tomorrow, I can expect your poison letters and used envelopes under my door. It's another beautiful poem, and notice the kind of images that he uses. Very domestic images, but very apt as well. And there are sound effects, like in Sonia's sonnet. There's onomatopoeia at work, snipping and snapping. Right? So poetry, as I was telling the people in front, capitalizes on imagery. Half an hour.
We advise you to do so now as our self-check machine. We thank you for your visit and hope to see you again soon.
Okay, poetry is like a verbal picture, right? So it, especially modernist poetry makes use of all these things that appeal to the senses, and the more unusual it is, the better. If you can appeal to your sense of smell, for instance, or to your sense of hearing, that would probably make an unusual, very interesting poem. And here we have onomatopoeia, also in Sonia's work. And I think I have a poem on the next slide. So we don't have much time, but I'm just going to go through the elements of tragedy with you. The Greeks wrote a lot about this dramatic form. The basic elements you find in Oedipus, the king. You have a basic conflict: man against himself, or man against nature, man against supernatural forces that he cannot overcome. Right? And there is some reconciliation. There's at least a hint of it, even in the most tragic stories. So we have a contemplation of fine human feelings in some of them. In Electra and her doomed brother, her doomed mother and her vengeful brother, right? Or sometimes you have an efficient human force, Heracles trying to re-establish order in his kingdom, right? And there's always an underlying order that people are always trying to maintain. And that's a quotation from a tragedy by Sophocles. In all of this, there is nothing that is not Zeus. It sounds very Christian, in a way, right? There are other tragic elements that you can use in poetry or in drama. You have suffering, right? In Aeschylus, people are able to fully realize themselves once they accept the suffering that they encounter. Right? Also very Christian. And in Euripides, you have a sympathy for the villain, where he's not totally evil, he's just like you and me, right? With virtues, some flaws, right? But the villain tends to give in to the flaws, or to demonstrate those flaws more readily. Now, here's a big question. Can moderns write tragedies? Yeah, of course you can, right? And there's plenty of that on screen, right? And there's a quotation from an expert on tragedy. People in general have so much courage that one is impressed by courage rather than being impressed by suffering. And what makes a tragic hero heroic would be his boundless bravery against all odds, right? He's like Bruce Willis in his movies, right? He doesn't give up, and yeah, your heroes can be like that as well. Okay, here's a new poem that has yet to be published. It's in my second collection, and I'm going to read it out to you. It's rather unusual, right? A tycoon's new kidney. It hides innocent behind my liver, sifting bile in slow time, has been churning hops, in brews where its first owner near drowned. It churns blackly with every gurgle swig, flushed down my throat, parched by chatter, with those who pledged would die for me. I wonder during nightmare chills what care that drug lord gave it. Did he savor power extracted from its gentle fire as he lay awake? At company dinners, alone in bed, all night carousing, sweat covers my pate. How long can this barred peace hold? Like its old host, I too am accused, a frenzy of nerves at first light, denied red vintage comfort. I coveted the kidney. Sometimes I am not holding myself, get the shakes when I pour over drug bust news, harbor murderous thoughts about strangers. I stifled a laugh at his living will. I did see a prayer before his bowels spilled out for eternity when he hanged in China. Yeah, that's right. And he's displaying some courage there, and he's at the same time reflecting on everybody's ultimate fate. Right? Yes. It's difficult to ask poets, what their work is, but there must be there. Yeah, because he has to endure all of these discomforts. Yeah, but he just accepts them. He endures them, and that makes him heroic in a way. But he's not really so. Okay, now here's the last writing exercise for you. And this is where the therapy part can come in. I just had the first aid course early this week, and we were told that in one of these sessions, the participants are asked to write a letter to a loved one, right? About some frustrations or some hurts that you've had, in the past, and just try to write them out. But since this is a poetry workshop, why don't you do it in a poetic form? And try to see what that can do for you. But you can write about love if you want, but you can also write about hurt.
RSVP. Dear X, I'm getting married soon. Once this would have been easy to tell you. Back then it wouldn't have surprised you. I think you would have been the first to know. Now things are easier for you. No need to hire a photographer, seamstress, chauffeur. Just bring yourself, an ang pao, and all your regret to sweeten my banquet. You are invited. Respond if you please. You always like the last word. Cordially, why?
Yeah, big hand for that.